Welcome back. Video number 5, applying E1 to the Batton bicycles operational case study. Here we are adopting a E1 specific approach, so we're going to be looking at the E1 syllabus and linking it to the Preseen material. I've done 45 slides, and certainly if you wanted to have them you could email me, and I've left my email address at the end of the program. But without more ado, what we're going to try and achieve from the video is that we can develop the case study using our knowledge and understanding of the syllabus, and I've done one question to show you how it can be answered. In the context of the slides, I've done it as part of the notes, but it's certainly, I'll put it on the screen so that you can see it, and I'd like it to be something which enables you to analyse the case and to attempt questions of your own. The syllabus is made up of 6 areas, and here we can see all 6 of them. Introduction to organisations, and we've got the new owner, Jim, and we've got his he's been in place for many years, but in his role in the sales department. Now he's taken over completely from his father, and it's possible that the examiner will use this as an opportunity to explore the idea of a new mission. Then we've got the organisational structure, and thirdly we've got ethics. Now I'm going to explore the organisational structure a little bit in a few minutes, but certainly we can think about the new mission. What is the purpose of the business? What are the underlying aspects that Jim will regard as being crucial to the identity of Batton? He may well be moving away from this high engineering mission which they've had in the past. He may be moving towards something more akin to the high technology that we saw in the first of the articles, where they might even be using carbon fibre to manufacture bicycles. He may be moving towards the more fickle, perhaps, colour conscious bicycles, and the bicycles as a fashion accessory. That could be an opportunity for perhaps a small question. I think organisational structure offers an opportunity for a much bigger question. So what are we told? We're told by CIMA themselves that they have a caricature called Robin, and she is a finance assistant, and that's the role that we are expected to have within any of the operational case studies. We won't necessarily be called Robin, but certainly that's our role within the exams that they are going to set. And one aspect of this was that we have to understand how the business is structured, and as such I can't help but think, well, this is worth a further investigation in terms of Batton bicycles, just because it got that mention within the CIMA guidance. So what have we got? An organisation which is a medium size. It seems to have a fairly low level of formality. We've got production workers who, certainly based on the processes that they are doing, give the impression that they've got a high level of specialisation. It is interesting to note that they are all paid the same amount, but even so, I suspect that we may be dealing with quite specialised skills in that area. Complexity is low. We've only got 2 types of bicycles, and they're only offered in 4 types of colours. So we're not going to have major issues of a huge number of products that the company is trying to sell. The suspicion that I had was that Jack, Jim's father, was quite an autocratic leader, and as such there may well have been quite a lot of centralisation. Centralisation meaning that the business would tend to refer up decisions rather than delegate them down. This has its pros and it has its cons, but certainly one of the questions that I had was whether Jim might be more willing to allow his subordinate staff to make decisions on his behalf rather than having to make them himself. So if we are looking at their current situation, then I think it would tend to suit what we call a flat hierarchy. So we've got quite a lot of people on a fairly level setup. Now we've got the contextual dimensions, the three dimensions that tend to dictate the organisational structure: the technology, the processes. We've got all these different processes that are involved in manufacturing a bicycle, and they are interrelated because the bicycle goes through one step to the next, to the next, to the next. It's not high tech though. It's quite a low tech and quite manual and skilled labour based rather than computer based. They have a rival, the Cartwright bicycles, that appears in the third of the magazine articles, and I would suspect that they do something quite differently. But this is a low-tech but an interrelated business. And I think also that the ordering systems, both the customers when they place orders and when the procurement department place orders with the suppliers supplying Batton, they don't appear to have any technological links. So you can see the opportunity the examiner has to introduce this kind of aspect and as such begin to have an impact on the organisational structure. Then we look at the environment, and here perhaps it justifies Jack's approach in the past when the environment was fairly stable and the same quality of bicycle would have been bought by father and mother, daughter and son, and so on and so forth, whereas now people buying bicycles want to have something which is more dynamic than their parents and their grandparents. So a more turbulent environment surrounding the organisation, which suggests the need to be able to make more decisions. And again, a flat hierarchy would tend to suit this because they don't have to refer all these questions up to the boss, who wants to sort of hold on to all the decision making. And sure, the culture, which I mentioned on the previous slide, it may well be that we've now changed in terms of how authoritative the boss is. We will need to see the unseen material before we can be sure. The other aspect, which I think is also applicable, is in our own finance department, where we got this quote from David that said, "You, Liz and Gloria, are more than capable of coping without a financial controller." Wow. So if he wants us to be able to do this job without the financial controller, then that takes out a layer of management. It leaves the structure more flat, and it raises a couple of points as well. So we'll move on, we'll look at the type of question, and we'll come back to that one to do with David and the lack of a financial controller again and again as we work our way through these slides. In one of the samples, the question cropped up, please send me a report on the advantages and disadvantages of whatever the company was adopting in that case, a functional organisation given their future plans. So we know the examiner tests this topic. So Jim might ask, does the current organisational structure fulfil the needs of Batton bicycles? Well, perhaps it did, perhaps it doesn't. But certainly we are recognising that if it is based on facts that were true in the past that are not true in the future and are not true now, then we may conclude that the organisational structure is actually working against the success of the company and could actually be contributing to the falling profits that we've identified. And it could be that the Cartwright bicycles, who I've mentioned already, is rather more technologically advanced competitor, not really competing with us in our niche, but certainly competing as a bicycle provider. They may well have a far more dynamic, flatter organisation that deals with decision making so that they're able to respond to the technological needs of that niche in the market that are looking for fairly up-to-date bicycles and are taking their cycling very seriously and no doubt paying a high price for the high quality bicycles that they want to buy. Now, if you're asked about appropriate structure, I would tell you to take a view over the whole of the business. So look at it in terms of whether the business needs to be making decisions quickly. And if they do, then we need to have authority delegated down. Otherwise, feeding back to the senior management will tend to slow things down. But if we need a high level of control, then the senior staff need to be at the decision making point, because they are there ensuring that the quality is maintained, ensuring that junior members of staff are not going off in a maverick sort of a way, making decisions that are going to affect the whole company, when really we don't want that. We want to maintain the reputation and so on in relation to high quality engineering and so on, and not have staff just making up their own rules on a whim. So decision making and control, we need to be looking at where those levels of decision making have to be taking place before we can decide exactly what the appropriate structure needs. And the other one is communication, because certainly I mentioned this when we looked at the organisation chart when we were going through the Preseen. But if you could imagine that Becky Tall needs to discuss with the painting supervisor certain bicycle colours, it could be that there's been an inquiry from one of her customers that says, could we have it painted purple across the crossbars, but with the mud guards in yellow. And at the moment we are only selling bicycles of a single colour. So does that kind of decision have to go up to the senior people, the production director or the production managers, or can Becky talk directly with the painting supervisor? That's an important question, because it depends on organisations. I'm sure that in the army, where they rely on a very formal structure, that a lance corporal or a private in one division wouldn't be able to discuss things that are going to affect the army as a whole with someone of the same rank in another division. They would have to work their way up to their senior officers and then back down again. In a organisation that may well be concerned with producing high quality advertising and so on, it may be that the staff are able to talk directly to one another. So we need to establish exactly what's going on within Batton, and I think the unseen material will give us that opportunity. Right, so we've spent about 13 minutes looking at organisations. Now that's quite a big chunk of our time, but I think that makes sense because it constitutes 25% of the syllabus, which is the biggest single element, and the organisational structure aspect was mentioned as part of Robin's role within the CIMA guidelines. Right, on ethics, your examiner can expect you to know the ethical code, and you can certainly be expected to answer a question on ethics on this and on all the case study exams. But one area that could come up for ethical consideration is the personal protection of paint staff. And we would need to be able to recognise the compromise that could be presented where Jim may want to save some money or increase the number of bicycles that he can have painted in a particular amount of time, and in doing so, if that meant that the staff protection was cut back, then we could have a compromise which includes an ethical element. We know the 5 ethical elements: integrity, meaning honesty and straightforwardness, professional competence, the ability to be able to do what we're doing and the diligence to carry it out properly, and the confidentiality of not disclosing information of a confidential nature, objectivity, being able to make decisions and look at things dispassionately, taking decisions at arm's length without having too much of a threat imposed in terms of whatever it is that we're dealing with, and professional behaviour of not bringing the accountancy profession into disrepute. Now, if you're going to compromise your staff's protection, then that will be infringing integrity, because it is not truthful if you're misleading them into thinking that their clothes are going to be as good as their previous ones, when in fact they are a cheap substitute. And objectivity may well be compromised because the idea of increasing the profits is so attractive from a self-interest point of view to Jim that it takes over from the idea of taking care of his workforce. So watch out for an ethics question, and this could be one of the areas where he introduces it.